we're going to talk about the applicant tracking system, the job application process, assessments, application follow-up, and online tests. Before we start, does anybody have any thoughts on, or just a comment about where they are in their job search, or what your expectation is for this webinar? You can put it in the chat. Leslie, can they unmute themselves, or?
They can request to be, but yeah, if you use the chat or the Q&A, I will make sure we read those to Anna, questions or comments. We'll make sure she gets everything.
Yeah, so I guess if during the presentation, please ask questions. I want the disadvantage of Zoom is that, we can't have a conversation. It's me lecturing, and I hate that. And I don't get to see the audience sometimes. And, I like to read the audience. I want to see if I'm making sense and verify things or expand upon a thought. So please, share any thoughts that you have or questions. So I always start every presentation with this. This is the first step in the job search. And if you haven't done this, you need to stop everything you're doing in the job search and do this. You have to think about your skills. You have to think about what you've done in the job. If you could spend time, an hour a day, just doing this, this gives you the advantage in the job search. You need to know, what are your accomplishments? What are you proud of? Is it that special project you did? Did you exceed your goals? It could be even something as simple as, if you're working in a warehouse and you haven't had any accidents, that's a big accomplishment, because workman's comp in Illinois is so expensive. And if somebody gets hurt on the job, it's the medical cost, it's the cost of filling in that position, it's the wear and tear on the team that has to fill in or maybe do overtime. So if you are not getting in any accidents, maybe you transport people, you drive a truck, it means you're following state laws, you care about the safety of yourself or your colleagues or your customers. That's an accomplishment. Accomplishment could be letters from customers saying what good service you gave. But you've got to think about, what is it that you have done beyond the 100% that you're supposed to do in the job. And this is the conversation you have in the interview that makes you better than the next candidate. Not just memorizing questions to interviews. In the interview, it's obvious to the recruiter that you haven't thought about it. So you've got to put thought into what you've done in your past jobs. What did you enjoy? What did you dread? Was it you enjoy, working with the customers, or you didn't enjoy working with the customers? Did you enjoy working with numbers? Did you enjoy writing or editing or whatever that is? What is it that brought joy to you? And what did you dread, right? What is it in the job that you didn't like? Because that goes back to the question in the interview, why do you want to work here? So it costs an employer between, $3,000 and $5,000 just to hire somebody, and they want that person to stay. And so if you're applying for a job just for a paycheck, is that really enough motivation to get you out of bed in the morning, to go to work, to give 100%? Probably not. We've all had those jobs where we dreaded going. And that goes back to the passion. Like, why are you applying here? Is it because you believe in the brand? Because you enjoy doing that position? Why this job? And that comes with a question of joy, passion. Also, what did you dread? Was it the commute? Was it, working with the customers? Whatever it is, you need to think about it. And you need to think about your work behaviors and your values. And that's your actions. So in the interview, when you are, answering an interview question, you answer it in a particular way. They ask you the question, you set up the story, that's the situation, And then you talk about your actions. So this is a situation, this is what I did or didn't do. And then the results. And so those actions are your behaviors and your values. And then a company can't teach you, behaviors. They can't teach you to care. They can't teach you, to believe in what they believe in. And it's not their job. So they want to hire somebody that does things the way that they do it. And that's you talking about your behaviors and values. You've got to think, what are your behaviors on the job? How do you handle stress? How do you handle conflict? What are your triggers, right? What is it that sets you off? And of course, this is not the conversation you're going to share with the employer, but you need to know that. You need to know your behaviors. You need to know, if you don't agree with your supervisor, how do you handle it? Do you blow up? Do you provide, some evidence on why they should, go with your recommendations? So you need to think, are you honest? Is there integrity? Do you care for people? You do not care for people? So think about it all. Think about your strength, what you need to improve on. Think about your transferable skills, your interpersonal skills with people, your communication skills. Are you a good writer? Do you have good listening skills? Can you edit? And your abilities. And so you have to put yourself in the day of the life of your job and think about, okay, on this day, I talked to this person and we talked by email or I worked in a call center and I had, pick up the ring on the third ring or by the third ring, and I had to have the call completed by 5 minutes. And I talked to, 100 people that day. Or, on this day, our team had a dispute and I had to be the mediator. Well, whatever it is, write it down. It's fresh in your mind. And, you've got this list of all of your skills, your accomplishments, your abilities. And then when you're writing the resume, you work from that list. And really, when you find a job that you like, and the job description, you cut and paste that job description onto a Word doc and you break it down to action verbs and transferable skills. So that will kind of help you determine what it is that they're looking for on the job description, which is kind of what we're going to talk about later. But it's a full-time job to look for a full-time job. But the biggest part of looking for a job, even before you write the resume, before you apply for the job, before the interviews, you've got to think, what did I do every day? Who did I interact with? Did I interact with people in other departments? Why was I interacting with other people in departments? Did I have to give them reports? Did I train people? How many people did I lead? All of that. You've got to have all of that fresh in your mind. So that is the first step in the job search. So if you haven't done that, then please take time to think about all of this. And this will make your resume more effective, and it will, again, everything will be fresh in your mind. So does anybody have any questions about that so far? Okay. Just please, put something in the chat if you do. So don't apply for jobs on a job search website. If the company name is provided, go directly to the company website. And Indeed is the better of all the job searches websites. So stay away from really Monster and Career Builders. Career Builders seems to attract those kinds of positions that are commission, and sometimes you get trapped into putting your name on a list. I know when I was looking for a job, 5 years ago, I had to, I'm just gonna see, I was applying on Career Builders, and then I'd apply for a job, and then it would ask me, do you want to further your career? I'm like, well, okay, yeah. And then immediately got a call from a call center about, going back to college. So Indeed is really the better of the websites. You don't get caught in all those traps. The interesting thing about Indeed that I just learned, I have actually an open position here at the Workforce Center that I am vetting some of the resumes, and the only resumes that I could see are the resumes and the applications of people that actually applied on the applicant tracking system. So if you apply on Indeed, what happens is that the application or your resume goes to the recruiter, but it's not in the system of the company applicant tracking system. So I'm the hiring manager, basically, and I'm only going to see anything on the applicant tracking system. I'm not going to see anybody that applies through Indeed, because that automatically goes to a recruiter. So if the recruiter doesn't think that that person's good enough, then I'm not going to see them. But I might think that, hey, I want to talk to this person, but I'm never going to get that opportunity unless I say to the recruiter, I want to see everything. So, some hiring managers might not understand that. So there are resumes that really are not landing at the desk of the hiring manager. It's landing at the desk of the recruiter. So if you're not sure about what a recruiter does, all they do is they help fill positions at a company. And it's really a big, feat. I mean, they've got a lot of responsibilities, but they're the ones that are the gatekeepers. They're the ones that decide, okay, I think the hiring manager would like this person. But the hiring manager isn't going to really see anything that's been stopped by the gatekeeper unless the hiring manager says, I want to see everybody. And who knows if that conversation was even had. So that's why I say go to the company website and apply directly at that company. So usually the hiring manager could see the application. So every time you apply for a job, you have to register with that particular employer. So people that are unaware or not savvy on, email addresses or anything like that, they're unaware. They think that sometimes when they go into their email, that somehow the email is connected to, all these other servers and all of these other application website, and it's not. You have to remember every time you apply for a job, you're registering with that company. Everything's unique to that company. You have to set up a user ID and a password. Now, you can use the same password for every applicant tracking system if you want. That's up to you. But you have to start fresh with every company. So I said it before, it's a full-time job to apply for a full-time job. And you really have to set aside at least 2 hours to apply for a job, because after you apply, you might have to do assessments, or, the application might ask for a lot more information than another. So every time you apply for a job, you have to register with that employer. Save your resume as a PDF. When in the applicant tracking system, there's different tabs, there's different sections. We're going to talk about that separately. But in the section where it says, okay, now I want your resume, give it in the PDF. For some reason, the recruiters say that they could better read a PDF than a Word doc, but that's different than parsing. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And follow applications instructions. It's so important to follow the instructions. When I'm helping people on a applicant tracking system, they get stuck. And usually it's because they haven't read the instructions. So make sure you follow instructions. Follow it to the T. Even beyond the applicant tracking system, if the application or the ad says, send me an email, I want this, this, and this, they give them this, this, and this. They might only want that information because it's an exercise in following instructions, or it's an exercise in your writing abilities. But follow application instructions. Follow, whatever that advertisement says that they want. Give it to that recruiter. The application is a reflection of you. You have to remember it does reflect you. Your resume reflects you. So if you have a resume that, has a lot of errors on it, there's no attention to detail, you forget your email address, or the phone number is incomplete, it reflects you. So if you're applying for a job that says we need attention to detail, well, those are details. It reflects your inability to manage details or organizational skills or communication skills. So you have to remember you're being watched. From the moment that you fill out the application, you're being watched. And also, in the job search, make sure that you set up your voice message box. I don't know how many times I've called people and they had a voice message box that wasn't even set up or it's full. A recruiter is not going to follow up with you. They're not. They have too much on their plate. So you need to make it easy for them to reach you. Have an appropriate email address. Don't have an email address that reflects your hobbies or your beliefs. It really just should be your name. If you have to put numbers in there, fine. I've known recruiter or hiring managers in the past that would not hire somebody based on an inappropriate email address. Again, it's a reflection of you. You're being watched for your professionalism. Create an ID and password, follow the instructions. We talked about that. We talked about allowing yourself time to do the application. It says an hour, but really it should be 2 hours. And also when you're in the applicant tracking system, don't use the backspace button. And that's the one that usually has the arrow on it on your keyboard. If you have a keyboard, look at that now. Sometimes, we want to go back to the previous page and fix something, but that backspace most likely will take you out of the application. So on the screen, while you're filling out the application, there might be a button on the screen that says to go back 1 page or forward or whatever. That's where you do the backspace or the forward, not on the keyboard. So human resources is watching you. Why do you think this is important? Anybody have a guess? Want to put in a chat box?
Well, I'll take a guess that it has something to do with social media. Nobody else will.
Yes, they are watching you. And a lot of hiring managers will go back and look at your LinkedIn, they'll look at social media. In this day and age, what could be said about social media, right? Facebook, just think of all the people in the last year that have been fired for their jobs. It really reflects the values and behaviors of these people. And you have to remember, your job is 24/7 now. We are no longer in the day and age of a 9-to-5 job. You are on all the time because you are the face and the brand of the company. And if you are out there being inappropriate or your true beliefs come out, you could be fired from your job because, you have brought shame to them and the brand and maybe to yourself too. So you need to be careful what you put on social media. And, I remember, 12, 13 years ago, this was a big deal. Around 2008, I was living in Florida, and the company Habitat for Humanity that I was working at started having layoffs, and that was because of the housing crisis. And then 2 years later, I was let go because we had a big layoffs. And I remember applying for jobs at the time and being asked about my Facebook account. And at the time, employers were asking to actually look at your Facebook account. Now I think it's illegal, unethical, and they won't do that. And I've never heard employers recently asking that, but you are being watched. You reflect that company, and you have not only be careful, but it goes back to your values and your beliefs. Companies exist to make money. And they have a brand image, and if you do anything against their brand image, goodbye, you're exited out the door. So you have to remember you're being watched. So let's talk about the job application process and how it mirrors the company culture. So if the organization's hiring steps are rigid, the culture will likely follow suit. If the process is more human-centered, a candidate can expect a more relaxed atmosphere or environment. As you apply, ask to yourself, is this the culture for me? So, you've probably been in those situations where you apply for a job, then you got, maybe a phone interview, and then you got another interview, and then they're like, well, we want you to meet the team, and then we want to make a decision. Well, that's how they're going to handle things in the organization. Everybody's got to get buy-in, everyone's got to agree, or it's got to go here, it's got to go there, and getting something done takes forever. Well, that's going to be the culture of the company. And if that's what you want, and that might be great, yeah, everybody wants buy-in, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page. That's great. But everything about the hiring process is really a reflection of the company. And you need to make sure that you understand that, and that this is something that you're basically agreeing to when you're hired to work there. It's all about culture of the company, how they do things, how they make decisions. Just shortly, the company, they have a mission. This is what we do. This is why we exist. And then they have their values and their guiding principles. So the values and the guiding principles are how they make decisions. So, companies, they do strategic planning, they envision this is where we want to be. It's based on research. It's based on, what's going on in that industry. And if money's come, if they could get a grant, or federal government's giving money, or whatever it is. So they should be thinking forward. Again, if the company isn't a visionary, is that a company that you want to work for? One word, I think it's one word, blockbuster. Anybody know the significance of blockbuster? Anybody? Bueller? Anybody? Let me tell you. Blockbuster was approached by Netflix. Yes, Netflix approached Blockbuster and wanted Blockbuster to buy them. But the executives didn't understand what was happening, and it couldn't envision what media would look like, or streaming. They couldn't see the future. And where is Blockbuster now, right? I think there's one that's in Alaska. So think about that. Is this a company that's forward thinking? Are they going to be in existence? But they make decisions based on their values too. So the values could be honesty, integrity, we care. That's how they ask their behavior questions in the interview. And that's what they're looking for. Are you like us? And I know when I say that, you're probably thinking, well, that lacks diversity. What they're talking about is, do you believe in us? Are you passionate about this? If their value words are honesty, integrity, well, why would they want to hire somebody that's going to lie to their customers? As a customer, consumer, think about when you had salespeople, promise something they couldn't deliver. Well, why would a company want to hire somebody that does that? They lose business. They want repeat customers. They want the customer to be happy and to come back. That's how they make their money. So it's all about values. So look at the value words. And remember, the interview process, it represents them. And they know that too. So for example, Ben and Jerry's here, if you go to their website, look how fun this is. They tell you what to expect in the job search. You start here, you apply here, you do this, and then if you do this, we're going to do that, and then you'll get a job offer, and then you get a couple of pints a day of ice cream. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I love ice cream. So it kind of represents the culture. It's fun. They give you some instructions. It's like a happy place to work, and I understand it really is a good place to work. This represents the culture there, right? And then you got another company. This is how they, communicate with their applicants. They let you know, but it's very clear. yeah, it's kind of fun or whatever, but it really doesn't show too much personality. So you can kind of get an idea, go to that website, right? Look at the company website. Here's another example of the application process at another company. You do the application, you get a screening, an interview, and offer to day one, right? Clear cut, yeah, like the colors. So, pay attention to that. It really does show the culture of the company. So let's talk about the application process. You will be applying on an applicant tracking system. So what is an applicant tracking system? It is a system that employers use to track applicants. So 90% of employers use this applicant tracking system to track candidates. So it has a couple of purposes. Yes, when somebody applies, they knew who's applying, and then they could put them through the process of, okay, this person, yeah, they'll be a good fit. Let's move them forward. We're going to schedule, the first interview, or no, an email goes to this person. You don't, meet the criteria or whatever that email is. But the applicant tracking system also, it's used for EEOC purposes too. So every fall, an employer has to send an EEOC report to the EEOC. How many people applied for the position, how many were female, how many were male, how many had disabilities, how many were veterans. So if you recall, when you've applied for a job online, you're probably asked these questions usually at the end of the applicant or at the end of the application. So at the point when you start answering these questions, and there's like questions, do you receive TANF? Do you receive unemployment? Your name is supposed to be separated from these questions, and it goes into a different part of the applicant tracking system to collect the information. So the employer doesn't know the name of the person attached to the question. They just have numbers. And so the employer will give the EEOC this information. So it's used also because companies get tax credits for hiring veterans. They'll get a tax credit if they hire somebody that is on unemployment or receiving TANF or SNAP or whatever that is. And you need to know, one of the questions they ask is, do you have a disability? So because people are not aware of the EEOC questions or the connection, they feel free to talk about disabilities in the interview. You should never talk about your health condition in the interview. In all fairness to an employer, you need to apply for jobs that you could do. So if the job says you have to lift 50 pounds and you can't because you have a bad back, don't apply. But if you have a disability, don't talk about it in the interview. You're talking yourself basically out of a job, and you're talking to somebody that's human. They have prejudices, and your ability to do the job should be the only thing you want them to focus on. You want to keep them focused on you being able to do the job. You don't want them distracted by anything else. And, it's expensive for companies to hire somebody, that maybe, has a history of heart disease or even a smoker. Some companies give credits to somebody that doesn't smoke. So you need to keep all of that out of the conversation. And just because the question's asked on the application doesn't mean that you talk to the employer. The question about disability is only asked for EEOC questions. But anyways, I digress. Employers use the applicant tracking system to track the process that the candidate is going through in the hiring process. Applicant tracking systems, or the ATS, it does reject 75% of candidates. And that's because of incomplete information, not being a good fit, all kinds of reasons. So it's a good thing that you are here to learn about the ATS. So it manages the candidate application. It filters out candidates that meet the requirements or don't meet the requirements, and it keeps track of the numbers of who applied. So this is what happens when you complete the online application. First, it's going to ask you to download your resume, and the resume is not being kept there. You're only at the beginning of the application, you're only downloading your resume so that it fills in, and they call it parsing. It fills in the different sections of the application, so you don't have to retype everything. You don't have to parse. You don't have to. You could fill it in yourself, which is timely, or you could cut and paste from your application and put it in yourself. It's, you have 3 options, but the software removes all the formatting. So do not put headers, footers, or text boxes or columns on your Word doc. You need to type directly on that Word doc. There doesn't need to be pictures, nothing, no bells and whistles. So it removes all of the formatting from the resume, and it sorts it into the different sections of the education, the employment area, the skills, contact information. And then the employer's list of desired skills and keywords are matched against the results of the resume. So, the algorithm, that was designed to, find the right candidate, it might be designed to state that we need somebody, with X amount of experience. We need somebody that's a good communicator. We need somebody that pays attention, is organized. And that's why you kind of have to read into a job description. So when they say, I need somebody with good communication skills, communication can be many things. You've got to figure out, what do they mean by communication? Am I talking only directly to people? Am I only talking on, video chats? And the communication is also about interpersonal skills. So when you're communicating to somebody, you have to have interpersonal skills, because when you're talking to somebody, you're listening. And there's many processes in listening. There's many steps in writing, part of communication. Do you have good grammar? Can you have a complete thoughts? So you've got to kind of figure out, when they're talking about that, what do they mean? And then you use a cheat sheet against, what are these communication skills? And those are the words that they're looking for. So if they say communication, it might be listening, it might be talking, it might be writing or editing. So, it's looking for those keywords, and then it gives you a score. And then you are, the higher scores land at the desk of, the hiring manager, or the recruiter might think, okay, they got a good score, I'm going to call them. Now, sometimes recruiters or hiring managers will go back and look at people with lower numbers. It just depends. Depends on the volume of applicants. Depends if they have time or if they care or not. I mean, you never know. But the point is, you want to be the better fit, right? Any questions about any of that right now? Does that make sense? Are you confused? Is it discouraging?
Can you talk a little bit about the percentage of keywords? Because I know that's really important. And I didn't realize that till I started working with you guys and other people.
Yeah, I think I have this that explains it. So let's just go right here. Can you guys see this, YouTube?
It currently looks like it's loading.
Process. It's important to understand all the technology being used by job boards and hiring.
You can hear it, but can't see it.
Okay. Hold on one second. I think I have to go to share. Where are we? Let me get out of this. Share. Can you see it now?
Yes, that looks better.
Okay, so this will answer your question. So let me explain. This is kind of, it's a video to sell their product to a company that might want to buy it. So it's not geared towards a person applying for a job. So it's kind of a background to see like what the recruiter is seeing, okay?
Understand the hiring process. It's important to understand all the technology being used by job boards and hiring companies.
Can you turn the volume up a little, Anna?
That people are still reading resumes. Well, just a few years ago, about 70% of hiring companies were using.
Hold on one second. Let me see if I could. I don't know if it looks like it's up all of the way. So everybody will have to turn their volume up because I don't know how to change that.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see if that works.
Using applicant tracking systems to manage applicants. Now almost all companies and job boards like Monster, Career Builder, Indeed, and others are using resume filtering technology and applicant tracking systems. The proliferation of this technology has been driven by the volume of applicants to each job and the need to search for applicants based on specific criteria for each job. It's probably worth noting at this point, even if you network your way into a company, your resume will be put into an applicant tracking system. This is because companies are governed by equal employment opportunity laws to prevent discrimination and other unfair hiring practices. In most companies, hiring managers are no longer allowed to accept email or physical resumes without it first being submitted to the applicant tracking software. So referrals, social media, and LinkedIn all are subject to the applicant tracking system as well. Let's look at an applicant tracking system to understand how your application makes its way to the hiring manager. First, you see a job posting on a job board or corporate career website. You submit your application. The first thing to happen is your resume is parsed into its components so the applicant tracking system can show all applicants in the same format. Here's a resume in an applicant tracking system. As you can see, this is not in Microsoft Word or PDF. Instead, it is in the applicant tracking system. For your resume to get into the applicant tracking system, it needs to be formatted in a particular way. Unfortunately, over 70% of resumes contain some formatting error when being put into an applicant tracking system. This is why PrepTel shows you how to format your resume so that you know it will be seen properly. Next, the applicant tracking systems are designed to streamline the hiring process. Applicant tracking systems use technology to rate and rank candidates to each job. To do this, a recruiter just needs to click this button to identify the top applicants for this job. In the past, the recruiter would have to view each resume and assess each one to determine if it was a good match. Now, technology does this step, reducing the time and effort so recruiters can do other tasks. What job seekers need to understand is that your resume needs to be at the top of the ranking, otherwise you will not be considered for an interview. Let me give an example. I have here a top candidate from Harvard Medical School who worked at Harvard Medical for the past 5 years. This person is going to apply for a similar job at a major pharmaceutical company. This person has a top degree and has more work experience in this specific field than required by the job posting. You might think this person surely would be reviewed for an interview. However, when we submitted this person's resume, they ranked low on the list with only a 48% relevance rating. No one was ever going to see their resume. The reason for their poor ranking is that they didn't realize how their resume was being ranked. This is where PrepTel helps candidates. For each job, a set of unique keywords are required to get a top ranking. PrepTel identifies these keywords so every resume submitted is ranked at the top of the candidate list. Let's go back to our Harvard graduate candidate. In reviewing our candidate's
I'm going to pause it. So if you see right here, it says missing keywords. These were some of the keywords that they were looking for on the resume right here. So this is how they see, you know, or those magic keywords that they're looking for on that resume.
We see 20 keywords are missing and he has a weak rating. After adding these 20 phrases to the person's resume, PrepTel now rates this candidate as very strong. Now let's go back and submit this candidate to the job. Only this time we will change their name from Greg Common to Greg Optimized so that we can see the difference. Presto, we are now at the top of the candidate list with 100% match to the job. Now the recruiter will send my resume to the hiring manager for review. This concludes this video.
So that kind of, I hope, answers that question. Let me go back and share, sorry, about, you know, some of the keywords. Also, if you send me your, sorry, trying to find out where we were. Okay, if you send me your name and email address. I was talking with a company the other day that was they have this program where, if you know, it kind of answers the question of keywords. So if it's somebody is switching industries and you're wanting to know like your match in that industry, you download your resume and then the current title and kind of the title that you're interested in, and it will give you keywords or skills that are desirable. So that's another way of finding those keywords, and company values too. So we're going to talk about all of that in a few minutes. But anyways, this is what happens on the other side, you know, the side of the recruiter, when you parse your resume into an applicant tracking system. So there's several sections of the online application. Usually first thing that happens is you parse your resume, or you don't have to do that. You don't have to download your resume to, you know, be put into the different sections of the application. You could type it in if you want, or, you know, you have your resume open in a Word doc and then you cut and paste and then put in separately. So, but the thing about the parsing is it always makes mistakes. So if you don't pay attention to detail, and if you don't go back and look at the sections, things might be scrambled. The dates of hire might be scrambled. I know when I was doing that, on the top page of I had a 2-page resume. So in the top of the second page was my contact information. Every time it would take that contact information and put it at the bottom of the bullet points in each of the employment sections. So I had to go through each section and, you know, delete it. It would scramble my dates of employment with employers and put the wrong, you know, dates with the wrong employer. So you have to go back and check it and make sure the information is correct if you're going to parse it. So the parsing is only to make it easy for you to fill out the application. It's not going to be used as the resume that's going to be saved on the application, because there's a section usually, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, where that's where the resume goes and stays. And then, you know, you have, so you parse it, and then your personal information might be required, or other personal information. Sometimes they want your social security information. When I was applying for a job, I would not complete the application if they wanted my social security number, because at that point, I didn't know if they were even gonna, you know, talk to me. And, you know, social security information is pretty private. There's no law against asking it. They do it for many reasons. They do it with the thought that, well, you know, especially a staffing agency, because they're going to hire a lot of people, and it just makes that process smoother for them to do the background check and all of that, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So, you know, beyond contact information, there's other personal information they might ask. It's up to you if you want to continue with the application if they ask for social security information. Then there's the education and you know, experience, some required dates, or some of them and this is another thing I see people struggling with on the application. It'll be a box that says, they want the dates, and then there's a little calendar icon. If you click on the icon, then the calendar comes up, and then you could choose dates. Some of it wants you to type in, and it's usually in a for 8-digit, so 2 digits for the month, 2 for the day, and then 4 for the year. So you kind of have to play around with that. And then there's the employment history. You need to know that it is against the law in Illinois to ask for your salary information from your previous employer. And I'm seeing that some of these applications still do that. So a company should not ask you how much you made in a previous position. And then there's the reference area. That's, you have personal and professional references. You need to know that a professional reference is not somebody that's a friend or a family member. It must be somebody you worked with. That could be just a colleague that, and they're looking for somebody to testify to your character, basically, right? So they can't do that without a professional reference. You usually, and people, they have their work personality, and then they have their social personality, which is something that employers are worried about, because again, it's in this social media era, you're always on. So you need to know the difference though between the two. If they ask for professional, do not put a family member on there. And I'm really kind of iffy about using clergy. That's up to you. We hope that, the hiring manager and recruiter, would be biased, but you're working with humans, right? And then it's asking your availability, when can you start, what shifts, and then the download section. So this is where you put the resume that you want them to see. That's the pretty one. If you want, you could have color on it if you want. It's up to you, but for parsing purposes, don't use anything fancy. You only use a resume where everything's typed directly on the Word doc. That's for the parsing resume. EEOC questions, we talked about that. They might, have employer credits for military, TANF, SNAP, unemployment. They'll ask you questions. That's the EEOC and the employer credit section. Authorization, that's when you are filling out an online application, that's a legal document. Now, yes, it's like a resume, they have the same information, but your application is a legal document. And most of the times you are initialing and signing that employer will do a criminal background check on you. You're agreeing to a drug test. You're agreeing to them talking to your employer. And on that note, when they talk to an employer, they can only ask 3 questions. When did you start? 4 questions. When did you start? When did you end? What was your title? And would you rehire this person? There should be no conversation about anything else when they talk to the employer to verify that you work there. Now that's different than you giving an okay, or you giving a personal, using somebody as a personal reference. Now, if that employer, if that person's still working with the employer, there might be some legalities to that. So, usually it's not, but you never know. Employers are starting to be a little bit more picky with the legalities of that. But anyway, so you are authorizing the employer to do all of this. That's what that authorization is. And it's a legal document. And also you are testifying, or you're stating everything that I put on here is correct. Yes, I am agreeing that, yes, I'm giving you correct information about my college degrees, that this is when I started and ended with this employer. And I have known people that lied about that information. They were fired from their job after being there 6 months. So they take it serious. So you need to know that. And then there's the update section of candidate process. So the online application, most of the time, some of these ATSs will show you where you are in that hiring process and give you updates there. So you should go in there, you know, at least a couple times a week to kind of go and see where you are in the process. So as you're filling out the application, there's usually like this red asterisk. It means that you must answer the question before proceeding. So if you're stuck on a page, some of the times the application will show you where it will automatically stop at the point where you have, you know, an incomplete answer, or it's wrong, or it needs to be filled out. Other times you have to scroll back up to the top of the page and then slowly go back down the pages, and there'll be something highlighted to say, hey, you kind of need to fill this out, or you forgot it, or the formatting's wrong, but follow instructions. Once the application is completed, hit the save or the submit tab. If you've missed any questions or provided incomplete questions, you can't proceed. So scroll up and down to find the error. Once the application is completed, you will most likely receive an email letting you know if there are next steps and what to expect. So you should go back, you know, you should be in your email a couple times a day looking to see for updates. If you're in an active job search, you should be applying for 20 jobs a week, and that's 5 a day. You know, 2 a day is great, but you know, you have to do, you know, your odds are greater of landing the job that you want with the more applications that you fill out and submit. So you need to be checking your emails to see, is there any contact? You know, a lot of the times that's how they're going to reach out to you. You'll only probably get a call if they're calling maybe to set up a phone interview, because it's usually the first step in the process. But sometimes the email will say, hey, you know, we need this from you, or there's, you know, there is a video that we want you to do. Those are the on-demand interviews where you're asking questions or answering questions, but not talking to anybody. There might be an assessment, but check your emails. They're going to tell you the next step. The resume and the applicant tracking system a little bit more. We showed the video. Make sure your resume reflects the position you're applying for. Those are the keywords. This is a hard, soft skill, job title, you know, achievements. What I said before at the beginning of the presentation is you need to put that job description on a Word doc and get rid of unnecessary words and break it down to action verbs and transferable skills. Those are those words that they're looking for, right? Those are the hard skill, soft skill words that they're looking for to see if you're a good match. So make sure that on your resume, there are no buzzwords or cliches, especially in the summary section. You know, it's obvious to the recruiter and the hiring manager that you didn't put any thought into your resume. You know, if you're cutting and pasting a summary that says, yeah, I'm detailed and I'm a go-getter or I'm driven, you know, those are just words basically used in a job. The objective, they want passion from you. Again, you know, why do you want to work here? And you could put your personal mission statement instead of a summary. And that is a, 2-minute elevator, or, a 1-minute or 2-sentence elevator speech about what you do and what you do well. So stay away from these buzzwords and cliches. Now, when you see in the job application where it says, we want a team member, that can mean many things. A team member could be, maybe you're working on projects with a team. They don't want to hire somebody, that's going to break up this team that's working well together, right? Where do you fit in this team? Are you the kind of person that's going to take charge? It's not your job to take charge. Are you the kind of person, that's not going to, they're worried you're not going to pull your weight. So, what does team mean? That means good interpersonal skills, right? How do you work with people? How do you influence them? How do you make connections with them? So you have to read into that buzzword. What does that really mean? And I do actually have a handout on buzzwords. So I don't have it on me. But if you send me your email, I'll also send you that too. Go to the company website, which you should automatically do anyways, and use their words in your resume. So go back, going back to those value words, that's where how they're going to ask you behavioral interview questions. Again, integrity. If they're talking about caring, tell us about, going the extra step with a customer. Is it integrity, confidentiality, right? That's a big one, especially in healthcare. Use those words, talk about that. Use their catchphrases, not on the resume, but when you're talking to them, talk like them, right? You're building a connection with that person. If you land the interview, they most likely think that you could probably do the job. So the interview is about making that personal connection with somebody. Basically it comes down to, can I work with you for 8 hours a day, right? Are you easy to get along with? Are you going to show up and do your job? Can I present you in public, right? You're the face of the organization. So in your discussion with them and on your resume, use some of these words that they use, not the buzzwords, but the guiding principle words, the value words. Make sure your resume application is error-free, right? No incorrect spellings. Make sure you have your contact information. Make sure your contact information is correct. Formatting on your resume, don't use use bullet points. Don't use paragraph or summary form. You need at least 5 to 7 bullet points of your job responsibilities for each position. Don't use graphics, logos, tables. Don't use headers. Don't use footers. Don't use abbreviations. Spell everything out. Even if it's an obvious, certificate or database or whatever, like if you're in HR and they're asking you, do you know anything about the American with Disability Act? Don't use ADA, American Disability Act. Spell it all out. Use fonts that should be 12 points, Arial or Times. Nothing fancy. None of those nice cursive looking fonts. Don't place dates before the work experience. Begin with the name of the employer. So for formatting purposes, when you're parsing, the date should be on the far left column. When you're looking at your resume, you have your the company name, comma, city, state, and then all the way to the far right of that row is where you put the dates of employment. You only need a month and a year. They're looking for gaps in your employment, and gaps are okay. People leave jobs to care for aging parents or make the decision to stay home with their children, or there's layoffs, furloughs. It happens. It's what you do with your time that matters. Are you learning a new skill? Are you doing volunteer work? You could put volunteer work in place or in that gap if you have to, and treat it like an employment position with bullet points, with accomplishments, talk about what you learned, how it's transferable to the position you're applying for. Follow up, how will I know the status of the application? So check your status weekly. Some ATSs use the following phrase. It'll say you're in progress, under review, reviewed, interview, or a job has been offered. I think someone's asking a question. If the company address no longer exists, you don't need an address for an employer. You just need the city and the state. That's all they're looking at. So don't even worry about an address. On the application though, if they want it, usually I don't see it asking for an address. Most of the time it's just a city, state. If you don't have it and it's telling you you can't proceed without an address, just put unknown or maybe out of business, or closed down so that they know. But in progress, under review, reviewed, interview, job offer, these are some of the phases of that candidate process. In process or under review, this means the application is still being considered, and is one of the several stages of the human resource review process. So it's just being looked at right now, under review, in progress. You're just looking at it. The reviewed status is in the application means the employer's reviewed it and has not yet made a decision. So they might be in the process of maybe setting up a phone interview, but overall being under review doesn't mean something negative or positive. It's kind of a neutral sign. Online assessments. This is a big one. 82% of companies are using some for pre-employment assessment tests. So I have a thought about that. I'm going to save it for a moment. The Society of Human Resources, SHRM, a lot of employers now want their HR people to have these certificates. Society of Human Resources is a very appreciated and what's the word I'm looking for? Like they have some authority. HR could get certificates through them. They're very known. They're popular. They're respected. So it lists some of the following reasons why employers use these skill assessment tests. A lot of employers, are using these assessments to determine, if you have the right behaviors. So it's to hire new employees, it's to evaluate current employees, to identify employees with high leadership potential, to compare talent within the organization against industry or geographical benchmarks, to understand talent strengths and gaps. And to understand talent strengths and gaps. So going back to like the buzzwords and experience needed in a job, there's a lot of thought that goes into what skills are needed in a job. So normally, if HR is developing a new position or reevaluating a position, they always go back and look at how, like, the success of people in the past in the job. The people that were successful in the job had, whatever skill, technical skill, they had whatever personality or whatever behaviors that made them successful in the job. And that's how they determine, what's going to be a good fit going forward. And that comes where all those buzzwords are, or all like those skills, soft and technical skills are needed. But employers are using, these assessments to hire people. They use it in, succession planning. who's going to take over a position when somebody leaves or they retire, and they're getting the person ready for the next step in their career and the organization. So there's many reasons why employers are going to use skill assessment tests. Okay, so any questions?
I think you answered everything that was in the chat. There was the one question. I think the other one we get a lot though is about what happens if I don't want them to talk to my current employer, and my current employer doesn't know I'm looking for a job, because there is that sometimes that little checkbox that you kind of referred to earlier.
Yeah, so if you're currently looking for a job and you don't want them to call your employer, so it's my understanding that usually a recruiter is not going to contact any references or the previous employer until they've interviewed you. It's just a waste of their time to do that. So with that being said, you need to tell them that in the interview. Tell the recruiter, I haven't talked to my employer yet to let them know that I'm leaving, and just leave it at that. And then they kind of understand, they might say, well, do you want me to call them or not? Or I get it, or whatever. So if you don't want them to call your employer, if you say that, or even if you've left the job and you're not there and you say that, it raises flags. Like, why? They'll probably, though, in the interview ask you, why did you leave? Again, they haven't gotten to that stage where they even want to invest their time in, calling anybody. So if they, they'll probably ask you, well, why did you leave this job? And you've got to be careful about what you said, because, we bring our values and our behaviors into every job. It's just who we are. If you want to call it luggage or whatever, we bring it with us. And that's why the employer is looking at behaviors, because you're not going to change. We just aren't, right? We're human. We don't change. And so, if you're leaving your job, if you're a job hopper, why are you leaving the jobs all the time? And the employer's thinking, well, are they leaving because, they don't like conflict, and, and there's always going to be, and when I talk about conflict, I'm not saying people screaming and yelling at each other. I'm just saying, there's some people that you work with that are just kind of hard to work with. How do you work, how do you manage that relationship? Do you ignore them? Do you sabotage them? Are they sabotaging you? Are you holding back information and you just don't want to deal with it? You don't want to deal with them. So you're like, I'll just go on to the next job, So, and that goes back to the question, like, why are you leaving this employer? So they're looking at your behavior, because if that's how you handled it with the former employer, that's how you're going to handle it with them. And they don't want to invest in somebody that's going to leave. Again, it costs them a lot of money, and it takes time to find the right person, and then, you've got, the stress on the team that has to fill in or stay late and overtime. They want the right person. So they want to know, what are your behaviors? So if you left a job, if you're a job hopper, well, you have got to change your behavior. If that's getting help on how to handle, how to get along with people, or, how to manage stress, or how to have the right language to use to talk to somebody, that's on you. If you're leaving a job because, there's employers, yeah, they're pretty bad people. There are managers that are just horrible, right? Then you need to say, in all fairness, the manager was unethical, but you need to lay out and you have to really have the right language to say this. And if you need us to coach you on what to say, we're happy to do that. But you need to say, you know, I did this, I follow the company policy about how to have the conversation with the person. And maybe that person, you know, was just rude. Maybe they were doing unethical things, or, you know, it was sexual harassment. And then you still have to be careful about how you address it. So I hope that kind of answers the questions about, you know, this is everything that they're thinking of when you say, I don't want you to call my previous employer, especially if you already left the job. So that's just really kind of a further discussion to have face to face, and to talk about how to have that conversation. But if you're currently employed with them, you know, again, they're not going to do any of this calling usually until they've, you know, found the candidates they're interested in, because it's time, it costs a little, you know, it's timely or not timely. It just takes a lot of time through the background checks. It's just not worth it for them. Other employers though, and this is a big thing now, where employers, they pay into a system that if verification has to be done on a previous employer, there's an 800 number that they call that just answers those questions. You know, the day they started, the day they left, would you rehire them, and what was their title? And a lot of employers are doing that just for the legalities of it, because, you know, legally they can't say why somebody left, because that's confidential information, and they, you know, they do take it serious. So in order to get over some of those, you know, legalities, there's this 800 number you could call, and it's, you know, just AI or whatever that gives that information. But we could talk one-on-one if you want on how to have that conversation, but you got to be careful, because again, everything's a reflection of you. If you're a job hopper, why do you keep leaving jobs? You know, it's just time consuming. You know, employers want to keep people. They don't want them to leave. And retention is very important to them. So I hope that answers questions. Leslie, do I need to elaborate on anything else?
No, I think that was great. And that's just one I know we get all the time. So I'm sure you do as well. So I think this will be really helpful.
Okay. Great. So we'll proceed. So interesting enough, has anybody seen that new documentary on HBO called Persona, the dark side of personality tests? Well, it's a CNN documentary that HBO put on. I'm sure it'll be on YouTube shortly. It was really interesting, and I was reading some of the chatter on it, and there's a lot of controversy about it. But basically, it's about personality tests in the hiring process. And you know, why they're used, and really kind of how it filters out people with disabilities. And interesting enough, according to that documentary, it said 1/3 of these personality tests determine a person's current mental health state. And I have to say, I think I'm a pretty healthy person overall. But when I was looking for a job, and I've been here 5.5 years, when I was looking for jobs before here, when I had to take those personality assessments, I never got a call back. And it was really discouraging. And it took me, like a year to find a job. I was actually, for 6 years, I worked a year, off a year, worked a year, laid off, worked a year. And it was so discouraging to have to take these assessment tests, and I never passed it. So then I got to the point where I was like, well, I'm just going to kind of play the system. I'm going to do, when I do these assessments, I'm going to answer it the opposite of the way Anna would handle it. And I got through every time. And I think it's because, if you've ever done Myers-Briggs before, it's that personality test, which they talk about in this documentary, and we'll get to that in a moment. I am an introvert. I get my energy from, I have to be by myself. I have to read, and I need, to be in nature. That's just who I am. But I'm not shy. I mean, I'm public speaking right now, right? And I think that, the assessments, they do corner people, but we're at their mercy to take them. And actually in the interview, when they were talking about the Myers-Briggs, so it was designed by two females, a mother and a daughter. I mean, back in like early 20th century, like 1940s or something like that. And I always thought that they were, like educated psychiatrists and psychologists, and they're not. But Myers-Briggs, they said, was only designed to be a tool for people to determine more about themselves, but in regards to employment, not to be used as an assessment to hire somebody, but as an assessment after the fact, being hired by an employer to use for like personality tests. So teams could learn about each other to get along, or, to kind of filter out, like I said, succession planning, like who are the leaders going forward? How can we develop them? So Myers-Briggs was never meant to be used as an assessment in the hiring process. And they had, I think, like one of the executives on there talking about that and said, we have severed contracts with some of our customers because they've used that in that process. So, assess, you have to take it, right? I don't know how you could cheat it, but they are about behaviors, and that's really kind of important to the employer to hire, the right person for their culture. But but there is, for like the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, when you are applying online, there is a section in there that asks, if you need help taking it. There's people out there that have dyslexia and they can't read, but they're brilliant people. I mean, they just can't read. It's a disease, and maybe they might be working through it, but it doesn't mean they can't do some of the jobs. So I don't know what else to say about that. There are pre-hire assessment tests that you just have to take. And I don't know, cheating the system, does like I did. I mean, when I had that interview, the first thing the woman said to me is, "Oh, you're perfect. You aced it." And I didn't get the job, not really due to me, but they were just, in the middle of a new CEO coming in, and they didn't know how this person was gonna, if they were gonna change, some of the organizational charting or what their vision was. But anyway, so that's all I got to say in assessments. Oh, I know what I was going to say. What was interesting too, I don't know if I talk about that up here. Yeah, we'll talk about it at that point. But anyway, so personality test, right? So the Myers-Briggs is a really good, and there's a free, and actually I could send you a link to it, because I was teaching a customer service training the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we did this. And it's just really for your use. If you haven't done that, you need to understand who you are, right? Especially to get along with people on the job. If you're leading teams and working with customers, you need to understand who you are and what are your triggers, so that you can meet the needs of the people that you're serving, or your customers, or the people you work with, and to be a better team player. So I really encourage you to understand who you are and work through that. What are your goals? What are your values? How do you manage stress? Do you like numbers or not? I am not a numbers person. I use gut feeling to make decisions, and in business that might not be helpful, but are you patient? I mean, this is really important to figure out. And so, briefly, the first question to figure out is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And that's about how you get your energy. Are you charged by being with a group of people, or are you an introvert? Like, you enjoy being around a couple people and playing board games and, not going to clubs or whatever. How do you prefer to take information? Are you intuitive? Do you need numbers? Do you need charts, facts, details? Or are you, enjoy ideas and concepts and like to describe things in figurative and poetic ways? And, some of the other one is the T or the I, thinking and feeling. How do you prefer to make decisions? Do you make it, through, charts? Do you enjoy finding the flaws in an argument, or are you the kind of person you like harmony and forgiveness, and could be described as warm and empathetic? Or how do you perceive life, your outer life? Are you perceiving? Are you judging? The judging is, you prefer to make matters settled, or prefer to have detailed step-by-step instructions, or do you prefer to, leave your options open and see rules and deadlines as flexible? I mean, that's really all who you are, and that's what you bring to the employer, and that's what they're trying to figure out. Who are you, and are you going to be successful in this job? Are you going to be successful for us? So you will probably, like I said, with the Myers-Briggs, they said, and I've never ever taken Myers-Briggs in a candidate phase. I've always taken it by an employer that hired me, and I had been there for a while. Another one is the DISC: dominance, influence, steadiness, conscientious. That's another one that's out there. So get into the algorithm. So going back to that documentary, they had I think he was the president and CEO of HireVue. So HireVue, they do something called on-demand interviews. And that's one of the assessments that you might have to do for a job. I know a lot of, like Northwestern does it. That's where I had to do it 6 years ago when I was applying for a job there. So they're called on-demand interviews. And what it does is it's a platform. So you'll be sent a link to it and you sign in. And basically what you do is you record yourself answering interview questions. You're not talking to anybody. You do it on your own time. You answer this interview question, and then you send it to them on the platform, and then they look at it. I'm just reading what this says. So it gives you a practice phase in the on this in the HireVue, where you practice answering, because some people are really scared to see themselves on video or hear themselves. And actually, I encourage you, if you are in a job search, these kinds of videos, or even two-way interviews where you're doing them on Zoom, are very popular. And I think some of the barriers and hurdles to doing a good job in these virtual interviews is seeing yourself on camera or hearing yourself, and you've got to get past that fear. So in the test phase of the HireVue, that you get to test yourself on camera, listening to yourself, making sure the background's okay, the lighting's okay, which is all another workshop that I do. But anyways, and then after you're comfortable with it, you record yourself, in the test phase. Then you go into the actual recording phase. where you answer the questions that they have. So a time clock comes up, you have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then the question's at the bottom of the screen. So you see the question and you answer it, and if you practice your interview question, you should have answered the question in less than 2 minutes. You don't want to be, phased out of that, because it'll stop in the middle of you answering the question. So you're going to make sure you answer it in less than 2 minutes, which is practicing for an interview is really important. And then the stopwatch stops, and then you go to the next question. You don't get to go back and look at how you answer that question. You could do that in the test phase, but in the recording phase that the employer sees, you don't get to go back and look. So I say all of that to say, in that documentary, they had the CEO of HireVue on there. And from my reading and research, I have heard that these systems, these platforms are going to get more sophisticated, that they can measure your facial expressions, they can measure your attitude, and the algorithms do that. The example he gave in this documentary is that, for example, if they ask you the question, did you get along with your supervisor? Well, you could answer it, and to the human eye, it might seem like there probably, wasn't any issues the way that you spoke about it. But there's certain things on your face, like a frown or your mouth, or you start to get flushed, that this new algorithm can read it to say, I don't know, I think this person's lying, right? So it's getting more sophisticated is what I'm saying. And don't be scared by it. I know, it's upsetting and it's daunting to find a job, and it's hard. But this is where we're going in the workforce, and it's out there. And so you need to be aware of it, and you need to practice for it. That's why practicing is so important. You need to practice your interview skills. You need to be comfortable seeing yourself on camera. And we're here to help you, and the library is here to help you. There's resources for you. But you might have to do this in some of your jobs. And that's why you need to go back and look at your email. It'll tell you, okay, now you need to do the assessment, and what kind of assessment is it, and be prepared for it. So that's all I had to say about that. But if you need us, we're here to help you. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does it make sense? Do I need to elaborate?
Oh, it looks good. Everyone seems to be clear so far.
Okay, great. So in conclusion, follow instructions when you're applying for a job. Keep a running list of all the applications you filled out. Make sure you check your emails every day, reply to recruiter as soon as possible. Ensure your voice message box is not full, and you have a proper message. Don't put songs on there, or the child saying, hi, this is the Smith family. It needs to be a professional voice message. Know your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, your abilities. Make sure your references know that they are being used and that they should expect a call. Have a current phone number, a current email address. Any questions?